Hello and welcome to the Workplace Makers podcast. Today you have me, Nina Fountain, workplace strategist and host of the podcast. And I'm sharing my ideas today on meeting overload, this challenge that teams are facing across Australia, New Zealand and around the world as a result of hybrid working. So we're going to talk about where does it come from? Why is this challenge occurring in hybrid workplaces? And what can we do about it? And to give you a little bit of an idea, I've taken the reins today to share this idea. Normally I'm interviewing people, but I think I might start sprinkling in a few more podcasts like this where we can talk about some of these key ideas. If there's no guest talking about it, why should I not present the ideas for you in a different way? So I'm a workplace strategist and I've specialized in hybrid and flexible workplaces since 2012. I work with businesses with hybrid teams to create an attractive and productive workplace. And usually my clients achieve increases in engagement, well-being, and workplace satisfaction of significant amounts, at least 10% and up to 23%, while they also reduce their office footprint and make their workplace, their space, and their environment more attractive. And so I've been at the forefront of remote and flexible workplaces since about 2011, and I received high-profile media coverage throughout my career, including recently, only last year, as a guest on New Zealand's AM show. So I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand, and I consult to organisations across Australia and New Zealand mainly. And that's a little bit about me. But today we're talking about meeting overload. And why is that? Well, in my work, I aim for leaders and their teams to establish the conditions for success. So I do acknowledge that individuals play a huge role in achieving success in teams. That's, as a group, as an organization, a collection of individuals is essentially what we're talking about, organized in a certain way to achieve certain outcomes. At the same time, I do believe that a large proportion of the way people behave, so let's say around 70%, we could work with a number like that, is shaped by their environment. And the people often behave in ways that they would rather not, if they only had the right support to be able to do what they believe is the best way forward. So if we create a fantastic workplace experience for people, then we are managing the conditions in which they work, and we're giving them an opportunity to rise to the challenge and to be their best self, which I believe most people want. In fact, I'd say around 90% of people are keen for that. And that's based on my review of leadership theories, what I've read across books, what I've seen in organizations. So a lot of what we see as potentially unhelpful behavior in organizations can be understood through the conditions of the work. So it's a common myth that workplace strategists are focused only on property issues. But as you can hear from what I've been saying there, I'm really setting a new standard there for workplace strategy. And that I do believe that people are a critical part of the workplace, and we actually need to bring a solid understanding of people and the way people behave. For me, I developed that through my communication sciences degree, and then a career originally in health sciences focused on communication and speech and language, which was the main area. But I was always interested in how do I bring this across into business. Love business, love the outcomes that we achieve in business, love the experience of doing great work together. And so it's been a really natural transition for me to move from communication sciences into workplace science, we could say. And so let's talk about meeting overload. The reasons for this are really closely linked to the hybrid way of working. And hybrid is meaning that we now need to get really good at working with colleagues across different times and places to solve this problem of communication across distance. So the University of Reading published a study in January 2022, this year, and I became really interested in this study when I had a look at it after a conversation I hosted, and we kind of delved into this study, and that got me reading the whole paper and seeing the research there. And now, what you may be surprised at is some of the research that I share with you throughout the next few minutes. And it's certainly in a positive light. So it's coming at the problem and saying, showing us how we can solve for meeting overload in one particular way and get incredible results. But let's look at what and how bad this problem is. So meeting overload is having a massive impact on productivity. It's stopping work and it's forcing multitasking. 65% of senior managers have said that meetings stop them from completing their work. So it's no wonder that people try to do work during their meetings. They're checking their email frequently during a meeting. That's 69% of people. And they're multitasking during meetings. That's 92% of people. So meeting overload is indeed having creating a significant whack on productivity. And perhaps even more importantly, how people feel about meetings is directly correlated with job satisfaction. So this is true even after controlling for personality traits and environmental factors such as work design, supervision, and pay. So a poor workplace experience in meetings probably means that you have a dissatisfied team. And so we are at Transform Teams helping teams with this meeting overload issue. And we're taking a really uncommon approach, making it easy for team leaders to have more confidence in their team. And I'm going to share with you how you can do that and how you can solve this meeting overload issue. I do want to share some of the stats that came out of this report because it's just fascinating. It's extremely exciting what can be achieved by reducing meetings. So if you reduce meetings by 20%, as in you have one day per week that doesn't have meetings, people experience an increase in autonomy of 62%. And autonomy is extremely motivating for most people. Communication went up by 45%. People feeling that communication has improved, they have a higher quality of communication by 45%. We get similar numbers for satisfaction, 48, and productivity, 35. Engagement also goes up by a whopping 28%, which is huge for engagement. Cooperation by 15%, and then we see micromanaging and stress reduced significantly by 33% and 26%. Respectively. And then if you reduce meetings down by 40%, so having 2 days per week that are not meeting heavy, in fact, you have no meetings on those days, we see even greater increases across the board in all of those measures. Autonomy, notably, goes up by 78%. So people almost doubling their experience of feeling that they have that mastery or they have that individual ability to be master of their domain. And then incredible increase in productivity of 71%. So, and the numbers are all there in the report, in the University of Reading report from January 2022. So it's motivating to think that we could actually reduce meetings, potentially cut some out. This is an incredible nirvana, essentially, to be able to take people towards of a much more satisfying, much more productive, much more engaged and healthy team environment. So that's what gets me excited about talking about the meeting overload issue. And really at the heart of it is communication. And I first realized the key role that communication plays in remote working when I led my own remote team. And one of my team members was known for having an attitude that it was easier to beg forgiveness than to ask for permission. And so she got away with some really interesting and now kind of amusing, but at the time quite frustrating things using that approach and that mindset. It certainly got me in trouble with my supervisors or seniors at some point. So I was a kind of manager level, and I had a director level above me who was always asking about this particular staff member. So, but when I applied what I knew from my communication sciences training, it really came to the fore just how much communication was involved in that situation and with working across my team. So we looked at how was information flowing between us, and what platforms could we use to make information flow successfully. So that is actually one of the first things that we need to know about managing meeting overload. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But there's also another piece to the puzzle around remote working, and specifically this, I think, is contributing to the meeting overload issue. And that is that trust has been harder to maintain. And trust is something that we maintain actively, dynamically, and it has a number of different layers. But at the top level, the first thing that can erode often is that sense of reliability, that sense of confidence that someone is going to deliver on the work that they have been assigned or that they have opted in for, that they can be trusted to deliver on the work that there's a contract of expectations around. And so what I see happening is that managers are not having that same experience of trust. And so they're actually compensating, calling more meetings because they're not getting that feedback. They're not getting that confidence in their team members that the work is being done in the way that they would want it to be done. And so there's two pieces to this meeting overload challenge: information flow and trust. And in one of my clients recently, leaders were in 40 meetings per week on average. When we surveyed the organization, we got about a 59% response rate on the survey, and leaders had on average 40 meetings per week. So if those meetings are half an hour each, then they're in meetings at least half the week. If those meetings tend more towards 45 minutes or an hour, which is quite likely, then they're in meetings almost all of the week. So it was an incredible finding and a real eye-opener for the organization to realize just how many meetings were happening. Now, if hybrid work has created issues with information flow, let's just explore how it's done that. So information tends to be stored in places that people can't access as easily as when they were on site together at the same time. That's part of what's happening. So for example, when files are kept on individual computers rather than in the cloud, or when they're buried in email and emails being relied on to share key information, that can make it really difficult to keep track of this key content. And then sometimes the information is actually held in another colleague's head, and unless colleagues are working at the same time, that information doesn't get accessed as easily or as quickly as it's needed. There are other ways that hybrid work can affect information flow. Keeping the consistency or the truth of the information so that it is one single source of truth, that can be difficult to coordinate. It might be that it's not as timely. So perhaps appointments are being booked far too soon without the time to prepare. It could be that the information is less complete because people aren't getting notifications and they're not able to contribute, or it's harder to reach people because they're working at different times or in different places, and so you're not getting their contributions. And that can then affect the relevance of the information, because what are we dealing with? And is it still the piece of work, or is it still the piece of information that's going to solve the problem that the meeting is being held for? So imagine a situation where you're expecting a response from your team member on a Tuesday, for example, about a particular piece of work. By Thursday, you still haven't heard from them. You've seen other work being delivered, and so you know that this team member is at work. What goes through your mind? You start questioning, you start doubting, did the team member get that work done? Why didn't I hear about it? Was it an issue with notifications? Did they not notify me? And those kinds of questions or doubts can ultimately cause that trust to be eroded. And to some degree, there's just a little level of doubt that can then actually feed into more doubts, that can then feed into a real loss of confidence and trust. And so when that trust is eroded, we begin to put measures in place to get confidence back. And that's where we establish meetings that were previously unnecessary and meetings proliferate. So you can see to draw the link there between the information flow and the trust, if you're not getting complete, relevant, timely notifications of work being done, for example, then there's a direct impact on your perception of your team members' reliability. And that can then erode your trust and confidence. And you might start putting more meetings in or requiring more from them to be able to feed that information gap. So there's a few ways to address this. Firstly, you can declare a meeting-free day. And so it seems that in the University of Reading study, that's exactly what those employers did, is they declared a meeting-free day. But it's not always that easy. So yeah, declaring a meeting-free day could be a little bit like saying to someone with a broken leg, oh, get up and walk. It's not that hard, just do it. And of course, there's a reason that those meetings are in place. They're really critical for productivity, and you believe that they're necessary, or team members who are experiencing the same thing as you believe that they're necessary. So then the next option is to analyze your meetings, to understand which ones to cut, which ones to improve, or which ones to keep. And we have a diagnostic around that, a meeting overload diagnostic tool that you can find on the Transformed Teams website, that helps you to identify the meetings according to 5 communication functions that they are realizing. And so the different type of communication that's happening in the meeting is going to define what the expectations are, and also whether you can improve that meeting changes based on its purpose. So how you would improve a meeting needs to be cognizant of what is the purpose of the meeting. And the diagnostic tool goes through the 5 main purposes from a communication lens or communication point of view, to help you to know which ones to cut, improve, or keep. Then you can also actually get a little bit more granular and understand how information is being provided to the team and from the team. And you can then examine in a more thorough and detailed way how that's impacting on your confidence and your team's confidence. And so essentially, that's what we are doing to help teams. And it's a really exciting offer. I'm sharing it with you here. I'm going to share the process with you so that you can go away and do the same things with your teams. So firstly, you want to understand the inputs and the outputs, as in what information is being delivered to the meeting and what information is coming out of the meeting. And you want to use infonomics, which is around the value of information. That's essentially the term. It's kind of an amalgamation of information and economics. So it's the economic value of information. So you want to ask a few questions about the infonomics of the meeting. And that word is an amalgamation of information and economics, essentially talking about the economic value of the information coming into the meeting and going out of the meeting in this process. So the 5 questions you want to ask are, is the information easily accessed? So by information, I mean things like the agenda, the calendar appointments, the list of who's attending, the purpose, and all of that information, any pre-reading, etc., that is required before the meeting. And similarly, anything coming out of it, so your action list, your minutes. So we're asking questions about the quality of this information. Is it easily accessed? Can it be trusted as true? Is it timely? Is it complete? And is it relevant? And so if you ask those questions, you want to then understand which ones are, ideally you want to ask those questions, by giving people the chance to respond anonymously. You're going to get a more complete picture, one that you can rely on if you give people a chance to be anonymous. So you're creating that psychological safety through anonymity for people to actually talk about what's affecting their experience in the meeting in terms of the quality of information. Then you want to understand which ones have the highest impact. and solve for those together in a co-creative way. So now that you've essentially, in the first step, highlighted the issues, now you want to go through and co-creatively understand together what are some other ways? How could we improve the relevance, for example? How could we make this more timely? How could we make it more true and easier to access? And then you're wanting to essentially document and clarify that new way of working. And then you can map, as the third step, your new way of working against your old way of working, and ideally demonstrate the efficiency and the value creation to the team. And if you can attach dollar figures to how that's going to improve your confidence, or it's going to improve, reduce time wasted, then there's an incredible benefit to be seen there, and it becomes quite obvious to people that they want to do the same. They want to step into that new way of working. And so there's 3 steps that you can take with your team, creating a safe, engaging way to redesign your way of working so that you can reduce the stress on meetings and actually improve people's ability to meet the demands of their job. And so there might be one key question for you here where you think, well, we're talking about meeting overload, but now we're talking about information quality. How are these 2 things connected? And yes, we're not directly addressing the meeting overload. The way you could do that is just by cutting out one day. What we're trying to do here is actually get at the causes. And so the cause of meeting overload is often, not only, but often because the quality of the information swapping hands is not there in the same way that it was previously. And so that we're actually addressing the cause rather than the result. And what this should result in is people seeing ways that they can improve other meetings. It also can start to seed a thought and a new awareness in the team that there is another way of doing things with managing information, and potentially a new normal can start to emerge through that awareness that as a team, you really manage the quality of information more directly. You have more priority on it, realizing just how important it is to you as a remote and hybrid team. And so if you are looking for great resources on meetings, I can recommend the Meeting Overload Diagnostic, which you'll find on the Transform Teams website. That will help you to start thinking. And then also the University of Reading study for some inspiration. I will drop the link into the show notes so that you've got some fantastic references there and a great basis for starting a conversation with your team about why you would look at changing the way you're working. And so I would encourage you that meeting overload doesn't have to be the way you work going forward if you don't want it to be. So if you have those conversations now about the way that you work, then you can improve the content of the work and your confidence in it.